Why the world celebrates December 10th as the International Day for Human Rights. All Yemenis are subjected to the Houthi deadly machine on a daily basis. Political opponents, journalists, women, and children are all targets of Houthi killing, kidnapping, torture, and sentencing. More details about this are within the following report.
The 10th of December marks the International Day of Human Rights, with another year passing, and unfortunately, the human rights situation across Yemen has only worsened. Despite all the work being done by the international human rights organizations, more people are being targeted for their legitimate and peaceful human rights activities or expressing opinions or calling for basic human rights. Yemen is suffering for the 7th year under war and conflict that has left behind the tragedies and horrific violations of human rights, and despite the international movement to stop the war, the chances of peace are still slim. The protracted conflict has had a devastating impact on civilians across the country. Civilians suffer from destroyed critical infrastructure, including schools and hospitals, lack of fuel, and lack of basic services. 6 years into an armed conflict that has killed and injured over 19,000 civilians, while Yemen remains the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, experiencing the world's worst food security crisis with more than 20 million people, nearly 2/3 of the population requiring food assistance. Roughly 80% of Yemen's population required humanitarian aid. However, Houthis block those aids and severely restricting their delivery to desperately needed people, including over 12 million children. UNICEF warned that the number of children under the age of 5 who suffer from acute malnutrition could rise to 2.4 million. 7.8 million children had no access to education following COVID-19 related school closures, and nearly 10 million did not have adequate access to water and sanitation. Houthi forces recruited children to fight with them also in the battlefronts. The warring parties continued committing violations against journalists and media professionals, and restricted freedom of movement and subjected civilians to additional arbitrary restrictions that deepened their suffering. While the world celebrates the International Human Rights Day, Yemenis celebrate another year of devastation, destruction, division, horrific violations, and deepening social rifts which have created the most severe man-made humanitarian disaster, undermining Yemenis' ability to live in flagrant disregard of the basic rules of international law and humanitarian standards.